Alright, here I am. Okay, so are we actually on now? Yes, okay, and do you want me to be describing what I'm doing? Like you want me to... Yeah, okay. Alright, so I'm Alex. I'm one of the instructors here at CDW Studios. What I'm going to be doing today is just doing starting off a sculpt. I'm going to be doing it based off of this concept by David Cornish. This kind of undead demon lady. I thought she looked kind of cool. So I'm in ZBrush at the moment, and what I've got is just one of the ZBrush starter head Planet Heads models, which lives up underneath the Lightbox documents project head planes. So it's just one of those presets, and I'm using one of these rather than starting from scratch, just to kind of speed things up a little bit. So this is going to kind of have the general proportions that I'm looking to use. So it's a handy little starting point. One thing that I might personally do is just come over here and I'm gonna change my settings here down to 30. I just kind of like that, something I've gotten used to using. Gonna put my little concept up here. So I've got a my general concept just kind of sitting there, and I'm leaving it there so I don't have to kind of really shift my eyes off the screen. But what I do have on my other monitor is a whole bunch of references of like faces and some stuff that I've gotten off of Anatomy for Sculptors. So things about faces that I'll also be referencing, and that's on my other monitor. Alright, so to get started, right, what I generally like to do is kind of try and just get some eyes sort of blocked in. Otherwise, I feel a little bit kind of lost. So I'm going to come over to my subtool palette and just append a new sphere 3D. And what I'm also going to do, just to try and help me get my eyes sitting in the right spot, is I'm going to append a cylinder as well. I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. I might just quickly turn off dynamic perspective. We'll scale that down a little, bring this forward, just kind of adjust it. So I'm squishing it down for no real reason, just the fact that it looks a little bit more eye-shaped, but I'm not adjusting it in this direction. What I'm going to do is place it up there, duplicate it, so putting one there, putting one over there. I'm going to create 5 of these and recenter my pivot after clearing my mask, and I'm just going to scale this down. Right, and what I'm going to use this for is kind of just a rough starting point for where I want my eyes to sit. So I'm going to put them within this sort of area here. Now, I might make them a little bit bigger, but I think something like that, right, as a starting point. So I'm just going to use that as a bit of a reference for where I want my eyes. So generally, you want like 1 eye width between these two. Let's bring in the eye sphere, scale it down, bring it forward. Let's just position that. So it's going to sit kind of in this spot here. Now I want to make sure that from a side view, I'm putting the eye in the right place. So I'm not going to go too far back. I'm thinking maybe about there. Let's scale it down a little bit more. Alright, I'm going to come down and go to my deformation. Actually, first of all, under subtool, let's just duplicate that sphere. Deformation tab, and I'm just going to mirror it to the other side. Come back up, and let's just merge that down. Maybe bring that forward. You know, we can always change the size of the eyes as we go. So let's just put it there. Come over and grab my brush. So I'm going to be using the clay brush. It's a brush I generally enjoy using. Let's go back into dynamic perspective. Now, I'm usually working on a Cintiq, in which case I turn this down a little bit. I'm on a just a normal Wacom today, so one of the things is you kind of get used to just pen pressure. There's a slight difference between what I'm using here at the moment and what I'm normally using, so this setting might not be what I want in the end, but you know, we'll start with that. Let's come in and let's just start kind of building up some form where our eyes are going to sit. Okay, gonna grab my Dame Standard. And I'm just gonna use that to start bringing out what will eventually be a bit of a eyelid. Coming down and do it at the bottom. Okay. Grab my move brush and we'll just start pulling this around. Now, let's have a quick... Alright, so I won't spend a huge amount of time on the eyes just yet, because I'm not going to be able to really do anything too amazing with them until I get a bit more resolution and form going. But I like just to kind of start setting something there. Now I'm wondering if I've maybe, you know what, if I have brought those eyes too far forward, I'll adjust the forehead later. So let's just start with that. I'm gonna grab my clay brush, and what I'm looking at the moment, right, just to start generally blocking in some shape. Where is it? Where has it gone? I've moved my reference. All right, I've got this from Anatomy for Sculptors. And this just has a bunch of like the kind of general form shapes that I'm going to generally kind of want on the surface of my model. So I've got like this fold of the cheek coming into the mouth area. So if I can get some of this in there, right, it's going to start feeling pretty good. So grabbing my clay brush, might just start blocking some of that form in. The Dame Standard I quite like to use as a way of like kind of tracing out where I'm going to have some of my form. You know, trying to figure out roughly where, say, the lips will sit. Very kind of rough block out. I've also got, yeah, a bunch of face reference over here that I'll work with as I go, just to help me figure out what I'm trying to do. So I'm just readjusting them at the moment. All right. Alright. One thing that I like to try and get, or I think I want to do before we go too far, is kind of just figure out a little bit more of this eye area and get like the eyelid kind of sitting in. So we'll come in and we'll fill up this shape here. Grab my diamond, just readjust the eyelid. We'll turn that off for the moment, we don't really need it. Okay. So I'm going to start off relatively low while blocking in my general shapes and proportions, and then I'll step up my resolution as I need to. So if I stop doing stuff, it's because I'm adjusting reference on my other monitor as I figure out which is going to be the reference I really want to rely on. Now I'm kind of doing at the moment is I'm just generally blocking out some of these major kind of features and forms that I'm going to want to look for. So let's kind of come in, start blocking in some of the nose, getting that nostril roughly thought out. And what I'll do is just start faceting off some of these features. All right, let's come in and I want to just roughly block out where my lips, like, so everything at the moment is going to be just blocking out and figuring out just generally where I'm going to want things to sit. So it will take a while before it really starts to feel like anything specific. And as I kind of get into the groove and start feeling a little bit more comfortable about doing this on stream, so just roughly gonna block out just where I'm gonna want those lips. Come in and start adding in just a little bit of volume. I've got a couple of side views of faces that I'm using, just so I don't, I've got these 3 references up at the moment that I think are going to be my major reference. One of them being this face here. So what I'm conscious of is I don't want to push like these features too far forward. So this is gonna, I think, be useful as I do that. So let's just start bringing out our lips. Might bring that up a little. Let's come in and try and separate this bottom lip. So what we'll end up seeing is as I go, there'll be kind of like a... this part here is like my slowest part of my sculpt as I try to figure out what it is I'm trying to do. And as I start to chip away at these features, it'll all start to kind of cascade and it'll get easier, I feel. So I don't have a lot of resolution at the moment. That will come in time. I'd rather this be relatively low than too high and hard to work with. Alright, so what I'll probably have to think about a bit more in a second is just a bit more of general proportions that I'm going to want for this face. Because at the moment I'm just blocking in features and I'm not thinking about like how long her face is. I'm doing it this way just because I like to have a bit more of a visual idea of a face versus just that planes of the head. But it would be important that I do it sooner than later, and before I've added in too much detail and character. So, you know, at the moment, it's going to look a little bit creepy. So let's start thinking about that a little bit more now. Bringing out some of our features a bit more. Let's turn dynamic perspective back on. Okay, so I reckon we'll end up needing to make those eyes a little bit smaller. Although she does have, you know, relatively big eyes, but just keep adjusting them. It's just, I was looking at David's art station. So the question is, why did I pick this reference? And it's simply, David's the guy we work with, and I was looking at his art station, and I thought it was a cool, cool figure or character. So I just wanted to give that a go. What we might do is let's maybe stop blocking out things like the ear, just get some more of this kind of general character in. Now, the way that he's got his ears, they're kind of pretty extreme. So I've got, in terms of like elf ears, I've got some reference of elf ears up. And I might use them for reference over purely these, just because they're a little interpretive at the moment. What I'll do is, as I pull this geometry up to get a bit more of this kind of ear, right, that topology is going to start breaking. So I'll be making sure that as I go, that I re-dynamesh occasionally, just to clean it up and allow me to get the shapes I want. What I'll actually also do is let's grab some reference of an ear from a side view, and what I'll do is I'll grab and we'll start to like combine them together. So what I'm also going to do is actually just divide this model once to give me a bit more resolution. You know, the horns are a very minor element. It doesn't really matter when I put them in. You know, once I've got the general head shape, they can go there. They're not going to affect the overall, like any of the major proportions, I don't feel like. So you could definitely put them in now. But I'm going to probably kind of get some of the other features done first and then put them in. No, you have to excuse, I'm getting reused to working on a normal Cintiq because I've been using a, sorry, not a Cintiq, Wacom, been using a Cintiq lately. So this feels just a little discombobulating because I'm used to having my pen right under my eyesight. So as I get adjusted to this, I'll probably feel a little more confident. Bring in a little bit of what might end up being the anatomy we want to use, but you know, with the elf ears, we've got to probably make it up a little bit. I've gotten so used to using a Cintiq that I prefer that. You know, there's no real benefit to using the Cintiq over like the standard Wacom. If you're good with a standard Wacom, it's definitely easier to move around, right? And cheaper as well. But I've been using at work and at home a Cintiq for many years that it just now always just takes me a second or two to get reused to not looking at where my hand is. But I don't know if there's really any major benefit to going down that and using that. Yeah, it's definitely not a necessary thing. I'm just gonna grab my pinch brush. Just maybe try and close that up a little bit. Alright, let's come in and go back. Let's just rotate her face and think about her face shape a little bit more. Gonna move the eyes back a little bit. Just come in and just create a bit more of a cavity. Gonna grab my mask lasso. and I'm gonna just try and close this corner. So one thing I'm going to do is try and make this top eyelid right. It's going to sit in front of the bottom eyelid. So let's make sure we're giving it enough volume. Let's come in, try and push back the eyelid. Alright, let's try and add in a little bit of this zygomatic arch, right? So that's the cheekbone going down there. So I feel like her cheekbone's gonna be quite kind of extreme, or maybe that's what I'll do with it. So just putting that in. Maybe sink her lips in a little. Alright, so I'm going back over to some of that anatomy for sculptors. And what I'm going to do is actually, let's come over, grab my move brush, and I'm going to just sink my shoulders down a little. I might just smooth that in and put in just a little bit of this neck. So one thing I'm trying not to do is get too wrapped up in any one spot. So with this muscle, right, we're going to have it run back there down towards the clavicle, which if we measure this, right, generally what I like to do is put a clavicle about here. So we might push that out a little. And we'll try and give her maybe a bit of a slender neck. So what I can do as well is let's jump back down a level. I'll try and keep the neck from getting too fat. Diamond standard. Let's put on some lazy mouse stroke. Lazy mouse. just because I'm struggling to feel comfortable with my stroke at the moment. Just gonna set in the head a little bit by putting in a little bit of the neck. Okay. Now in terms of where we're gonna put our drawer, let's do it like this. So I'm just kind of got a couple of different, as I've mentioned, faces that I'll reference. So I really want to give her this sort of fat under chin. So as we come in, continuously sculpting it back to try and keep that nice and soft. Finding this other reference. Pull out her lips a bit more as well. What we might also do is maybe push her face back a little. Come back in. Just kind of fell into it, right? Like I wanted to originally be a concept artist, and I think that's just because like I've always wanted, like I've always liked art, and I've always liked character art, especially. So initially it was wanting to get into the arts, and I think not really understanding or knowing what 3D was. So, you know, I liked video games. I wanted to do art for video games, and the conclusion was that, oh, well, if you want to do art for video games, you become a concept artist. So as I started like learning and getting involved, right, with study, you know, I was introduced to ZBrush as a program. Like that's where I first learned about it, was when I was studying. And it kind of then became clear that, oh, actually, what I've wanted to do was this. So it was just a matter of figuring out what it was that I wanted to do, right? Which was just, yeah. I don't know, there's something about sculpting that I really like, something about faces that I'm intrigued by. So it's just a matter of discovering that, you know, there was a program that would allow me to sculpt. So what I want to do, hello, just want to try and, no, I never really do 2D, and like I would say I can't draw, and it's not that, like, I think, you know, the thing is that everyone can learn to draw, and I could probably learn a little bit quicker now as I understand a few more of the kind of general concepts, but I just find myself not particularly interested enough to put in the effort to learn it, like I am when it comes to, you know, sculpting. I want to sculpt and do better, whereas with 2D I just, yeah, I don't have the interest really. How do you improve in your spare time? You just got to pick a project, right, that you want to do, whatever it is, right? As long as you're interested. If you're not interested in it, then you won't do it. So finding something that you enjoy and that you want to finish, yeah, and just doing that. Just picking a project. So I've been doing more kind of like portrait type work, trying to improve my face sculpting, which is why when it comes to the stream, I've picked to do a face, because that's, you know, where I'm trying to put my efforts at the moment. So just taking those opportunities wherever possible. But yeah, I mean, the secret is just to do exercises or projects. You know, if you will learn what you want to learn, or you'll learn what you need to do better. You know, if it's something that you want to do. So that's kind of like a nonsensical answer. I'm kind of looking at what's going on over here. But yeah, the point really is that you will learn if you're doing something that you want to do. So if you want to be a character artist, you know, or you want to learn to draw characters, whatever it is, you've just got to pick a project that will run you through the skills and steps you need to know to do it. So I swap around between being interested in like real-time game rendering and using Arnold. I'm not one of those people that does like paint overs. I want to try and do it in a kind of production sort of thing. But but like as real-time rendering and game engines become better, that stuff excites me. So I'm pretty keen to do stuff in Unreal or Marmoset. But the last thing I was working on ended up being something for Arnold, and that was because I just wanted to try and really push a bit of realism, and doing that in Arnold is the best way at the moment, I think. I mean, I saw that you could download the most recent, like the beta version or whatever today, but I haven't opened it up yet. It's something I'll look at. I'm really interested in lumens, because the ability to see what you're lighting in real time and have it be accurate sounds pretty cool. As sometimes lighting's not something that I'm super great at least outside of just doing like a 3-point sort of character lighting. You know, that's pretty simple once you know what you're doing. But anytime I've had to light like a scene, that always kind of bothers me. So yeah, lumen for that would be pretty cool. Yeah, I saw on Chris Murphy's Twitter account, he was playing with the emissive material and moving it around. What I should do is be saving this. So I'm just going to create a folder. What I also want to do is just change my music over. Alright. So, come in, soften that. So my general plan is just to kind of get this as clean and as nice as I can at this low resolution, so that when I need more res, it's going to be alright. What I want to be careful of is adding too much form on the side of the face there. Okay, what I'll do is I might block in those horns in a second, just so that I am putting them in. I'll do them as separate geo. What I want to do is just try and round off this head a little. Okay, let's throw in a cylinder. Alright, so in terms of what these horns are, there's not a lot of information there, so we can kind of make them up. What we'll do is let's duplicate that. Deformation. Mirror. I reckon what we'll do is let's bring them a little bit more off to the side. Oh. Let's put him like there-ish. So I think what I'll do is like probably make them like broken horns or something. But I'll just block them there for the moment. Alright, just gonna add a bit more resolution and come in and let's define the eyes a little bit more. Now, like, what we might do is for the eyes here, let's just quickly sculpt in just a start of a pupil. I think like Uncanny Valley is kind of more of like when something is close to realism, but just slightly off. And I think that's pretty much all CG, right? All CG characters have the uncanny effect at the moment because we're just not quite there. So what we're trying to aim for, right? I mean, the thing that will make it uncanny is, yeah, just the closer you get to realism. So if you keep it slightly out of realistic, probably won't give you that feeling. I guess it depends on what you mean by the uncanny valley effect when sculpting a portrait. If it looks like the person, right, then it's a successful sculpt, you know? I don't think it's at this stage it's really possible to get something that looks in like rendering and that. Like, you can get a still that looks pretty convincing. As soon as it starts to animate, things look bad. So, like, you know, there's that scene in Mandalorian, right, with the digital double in the last episode of season 2, and I've heard people make fun of that for looking terrible, but honestly, I think that's a great digital double, and I think it's really probably one of the better CG effects I've seen. I just don't think it's possible to do it 100%, you know? So it potentially looks bad just because we can't do any better, and not because they've done a bad job. So, like, just coming back to that question, right? Like, with doing a realistic sculpt and making it good, it's just a time and patience and a reference thing. What you want to do is also get it into probably like something like Arnold sooner than later, because the camera in ZBrush can be a little bit misleading. So you want to get a skin shader on and start doing some test renders inside of Arnold, and then bring it back and adjust. Because you'll find that, well, what might look good in ZBrush sometimes doesn't look good. Once you start rendering it, it can look slightly off, and it's, yeah, because the camera in ZBrush can be a little bit not quite correct. I think the new camera stuff is better, but I think it might still struggle a little bit. Oh, just lost my clay brush. So one thing that's going to make this character interesting is trying to like sort of keep her vaguely feminine while also this sort of demonic kind of undead look. Because I don't want it to be purely ugly. Alright guys, I'm just going to quickly go on a 5-minute break because this is hurting my wrist and I need to just let it sit for a second. Alright, I'll be back in 5. on the in the chat. You know, one movie where theoretically the 3D is amazing, but it's one of the most uncomfortable movies to watch was that Warcraft movie. Right? Like, I feel really bad for some of the people that worked on that because that work is top notch, but those characters just do not look right at that sort of like type of 3D, like the orcs, right? I found them very uncomfortable to watch. They're just way too exaggerated, and that I felt had that kind of weird, sort of uncanny valley feel to it. Where there's a scene with like the mother orc, and it just was really uncomfortable. But otherwise, like it's a really, really good work, and everyone that worked on it should be proud. It's just unfortunate. I just don't think the designs, you know, because they're such exaggerated proportions, don't really work when you try to push them into that sort of style. So I guess the question, right, is books I recommend to improve your 3D. So it depends on what you mean by 3D. If we're specific, because we are doing ZBrush at the moment, and you're interested in ZBrush sculpting, I wouldn't so much say books. There's a bunch of really great like tutorials and or artists online to follow. The Flipped Normals website, right, has really good resources and tutorials. If you're interested in like sculpting anatomy and characters and faces, then as a book, the Anatomy for Artists books are really good. It's where I'm getting a lot of the reference that I'm working on from. So I've lost a little bit of her jaw, so I've got to try and maybe bring that back. Alright, let's come in and do a bit more on the ears now that I've not looked at it for a while. Maybe if I put this over here a little bit, it won't feel so uncomfortable. one thing that I need to do is try and actually separate that ear from the back of the head. So let's mask that. See if we can find a little bit of reference for how we want the back of the ear to look. So looking up like costume prosthetics and things like that. I reckon what we need to do is maybe flatten it, right, and get rid of, I've got like this sharp point on the end, so let's get rid of that. No, I kind of did this where but you know, she does have more kind of like batty sort of dog ears. So we might maybe try and mimic that a little bit more. My original intention was just going to do something different, but I do want to also make sure I'm doing the concept justice. So I'm gonna try and redirect it back into something closer to what I'm seeing in the concept. Okay, so I think what that is, or what you're referring to, is backface masking. So let's grab a clay brush. So if our intensity is too high, and we're trying to sculpt, and that part is too thin, yeah, we get that right, where it's grabbing it from the other side and pulling it forward. So if we come up to our brush settings, under auto masking, this is backface masking, and that will prevent that from happening. So it's disabled for all the brushes by default, but for a lot of them, there's no reason not to enable it. The only one that I've really found where backface masking really is something that is not like you don't want to turn it on for is the move brush, because it needs to be able to move the back faces. But for any sort of sculpting brush, turning backface masking on, you can do that pretty much without any sort of real issue happening. Or you just keep it off until the problem occurs. So I should probably come back here and refine. Oh, how did that get up to there? Just gonna defacet some of this stuff back here before I move too far along and forget about it. Thank you. So what we can try and do is just with our eye here. I'm just gonna pull that back. And let's try this. We'll stay with that. Let's go with the black color. Color fill object. Let's change that to like a red. Let's make sure RGB. What I want to try and do is just on our spheres here. Looking for toy plastic. Where is that? Okay. At the moment, it's the eyelids. That's what I'm struggling with at the moment. And that's just because there's a lot of, like, little complexity to get the shape we want. And you need the right amount of resolution to kind of get it. What I'm also struggling with at the moment is just... And what I might do is actually do this. We might grab this mesh. Let's duplicate it. And we might just do a very, very quick Z remesher just to clean up some of this, like, topology where it's got lots of these little points because they're kind of hard to sculpt and clean up. So we'll go geometry, Z remesher. We'll just set it to like 10. And I'm not going to bother about setting any curves or anything. This should be enough just for what I want. So we'll let that just remesher it. We'll project the detail back and that'll allow us to clean that up a little bit. Alright. So let's just start by projecting this straight back just to make sure our topology now is exactly in the right spot, which it should be. It's 1, 2, let's project. Alright, one more, and that should give us enough to kind of continue on with where we had it previously, but with a bit more geometry or topology that's a little bit friendlier for these sorts of areas around the eye. And then we can do another remesh potentially later or clean up later. But that should help us a little bit, you know, when it comes to cleaning up and getting these edges here not to be so gross. Alright, one thing I do want to maybe do, so I want to have but I think as I come up here, I'm gonna try and mask. I don't know why I've ended up with a lazy radius on my mask pen. That's right. Alright, so that should now allow us to clean up our lips a little bit more as well. And fix up some of that little crappiness that we were getting. think we need a bit more kind of softness up here. Because it's looking like vaguely like a face, but it's not looking particularly feminine. And there's a certain level of femininity to get this, so it looks both kind of, yeah, sort of vaguely sexy but creepy. You know, that's one of the things I liked about it, was that it wasn't just an ugly face. It has this sort of dark sort of, yeah, feminineness to it. And I haven't quite got that at the moment. Would I recommend a digital tablet over a standard drawing tablet? So what? Sorry, I don't quite understand what a digital tablet over a standard tablet is. If you're talking about a standard Cintiq or a standard Wacom versus a Cintiq, I use a Cintiq generally, right? Not at the moment. I'm using a Wacom, just a standard tablet. Generally, I use a Cintiq, or I've got at home a Shuion, which is like a Chinese brand. And I really like using a Cintiq, but like, you know, I was asked today to do this stream, and I'm in a room where they didn't have a Cintiq kind of set up, so I'm having to do this with a slight handicap, right? So I've kind of like painted myself into a corner a little bit, where if I have to do something and there's not a Cintiq, I feel extremely uncomfortable doing it. So like I hate that I'm kind of that reliant on drawing on the screen. The reality of it though is it doesn't matter what you use. If you are getting great results with just a standard Cintiq without the screen, right? Not Cintiq, standard kind of tablet, then that's all you need. Getting a screen tablet isn't going to improve your art or anything. So it really doesn't matter. It's going to be cheaper to buy a standard tablet, in which case that's pretty good and probably what you want to do. Save a little bit of money, and then, you know, get a Cintiq if you can afford it and you want to. In fact, don't get a Cintiq. I wouldn't recommend, right, honestly, spending that much money on a Cintiq. I think they're overpriced for what they are. You can get the Huions, right, and they're really good. Essentially the same thing. I feel the quality from using it at home, it feels just as good, but it's, you know, $800 versus some of the insane prices for Wacom Cintiq. But, you know, if you're starting out, all you need is a standard tablet. Just a normal tablet would be fine. Alright, let's come back into the lips, because I want to try and push. Now, I should have some other reference that I want to use. Let me see if I can find it. When it comes to the lips, because I want to do, there we are. I want to get this sort of thing happening, and I'm not quite getting that yet. Pardon me. How many years? It's been a while now. I've been doing, or basically making my living, with 3D related type jobs. Geez, my first job, I was 20 and with my first 3D job. So I'm about to turn 32, so I've been doing stuff related to 3D for 12 years now, I guess, which is kind of scary. That's crazy how quick that went by. Yeah, so some way, shape or form I've been doing 3D for 12 years. So like, I mean, it's how I've made my money, right? For the last 12 years. I haven't had, you know, part-time job or anything like that. It's been either freelancing, working at some studio of some sort, or a couple of years I lived off of making skins for Dota 2. Just doing Dota 2 skins for about 2 years. Yeah. So one of the things that makes doing like a feminine face hard. Like generally I've done a lot more male faces, and it's just that like with a male face you can be extremely kind of rough. right, with your forms, and it will look potentially good, right? You can say it's a very masculine character, or it's a very, you know, stylized and rough, but I find that doing something that's meant to be feminine, you've got to try and keep things really soft. And that is something that I need to practice a little bit more, which is another reason why I've picked to do this, was to try and practice soft transitions of our forms here. So one thing that will help here, I think, right, is just putting in this little, like, split in the lip. So the games industry in Australia, pretty much since the global financial crisis, right, in 2008, has primarily been like mobile phone stuff. So because before, I mean, and now, but especially before the global financial crisis, right, the game industry in Australia was mostly outsourced sort of stuff, right? Or like tie-in games, so not particularly AAA games. And the reason why that was that the Australian dollar was cheaper, so a lot of the work was American companies outsourcing work to Australia because it was cheap. Global financial crisis happened, and suddenly the American dollar and the Australian dollar, you know, it wasn't cheaper anymore. So that kind of killed the industry as it currently existed in Australia. And from that kind of rose the mobile phone game industry, because you had all these people in Australia. Suddenly, you know, what do we do? So yeah, that kind of became the mobile game industry, and that's what the Australian game industry is at the moment, with a couple of exceptions. The thing is, right, if you put in the work and you're good enough, you can kind of get work anywhere, really. If working specifically in the video game industry is something you want to do, I wouldn't worry about, like, that sort of, oh, are there jobs? Because if you're good enough, right, or you're really good and you put in the effort, there will be work for you. But yeah, I do imagine that doing, like, remote work is probably going to become much easier as becomes more common, right? And it becomes obvious that people can work from home. I know a couple of people who are working for American studios, right, in Australia, so just working remotely. So there's certainly a possibility to do that. Yeah, I imagine it's probably when it already has kind of changed things a little bit. And it hopefully will, right? As borders become less of a thing, right, due to the internet. I don't see why work won't become more available freelance, with international studios. Certainly looks like it's going to be a possibility, and that's cool. I would say no. Team Cherry is quite happy to kind of do what Team Cherry does, right? They're Team Cherry, and they're just gonna do their thing, right? So I'm sure it has brought a little bit of attention to Adelaide, but I don't know if it's like, it hasn't, I don't think, put Adelaide on the map, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have one of the best, indie video games come from Adelaide, so I'm sure that does help in some way. But I'm not sure if it's, gonna do anything for the industry necessarily. Indie development will spring up wherever there's good indie devs and ideas, so, can happen in Adelaide if there are people here wanting to do it. But, I don't think it's going to be as a result of Team Cherry. So, one thing I occasionally like to do, right, whenever doing a sculpt, is just remind yourself, right? Like, especially if you're not quite feeling it yet, with this sort of thing, I feel like I might need to come back to it after not looking at it for 10 minutes. And, it's 2 o'clock, so it's kind of my streaming time is sort of done. So I'll have a chance to take a break, but just running through our history, right? And just seeing, how, let's just drop it all the way back to the beginning and running through the history stack and trying to take a look at how this is improved. So hopefully that doesn't crash. Okay, so luckily, I do have this one up here, which has the rest of the history. So let's start from that one. And we'll just quickly run through and have a look at how it's progressed. Alright, so starting off, right, we started with this block out. Started just kind of working in eyes, started just adding in general features, and like this stage here, the first 30 minutes or so is the worst because it doesn't look like anything for a while, right? And you've got to get over the fact that you are constructing something from scratch. So, it looks awful for a long time, right? Looks like a blobby mesh at the moment. But we do just have to, just see that it is a continual process, refining. They're starting to add in some actual detail and define some of the shapes. And I think if you're able to step back and look at your work like that, right, kind of helps to see that, you know, we have made progress and that things aren't as bad as maybe we... Like, I have that habit of really getting down on what I'm working on. So just reminding yourself that it came from a rough block out. Alright, so if you have no experience with face sculpting, then I think the best thing to do, right, is, yeah, start from scratch. So I started from that block out, because if this is a stream with people watching, don't want it to be too kind of boring. So started with that to just kind of speed up the process. But if you, and like if I was doing this at home, just for my own sense of pleasure, then yeah, I would start from, let me just make sure this is saved. I would definitely have started from a Dynamesh sphere, and I would have run through the whole process of blocking out a head, right? And the reason for doing that is just to practice and get used to and understanding proportions and shape. That's not it. Where is it? Mouse pen at one. So starting from like a sphere, start pulling out the front of the face, right? If we look at some of the references that I've got, right? Essentially, what you'd want to do is ideally this sort of step, right? Where we start blocking out the general geometric shapes of the face, so the cranium, the neck, and the front portion of the face. Kind of find some of the first major planes, refining it into essentially what we started with, right? Which was something like what we're seeing in the top corner there. If you are learning, or just in general, that's the best idea, I think. It will make you a stronger artist. Starting from a base mesh, essentially, it's just a way to kind of cut out the middleman and, you know, yeah, get things done quicker. But yeah, for learning purposes, definitely starting from scratch. Right, I think that's it for my streaming today. So I'll be on again next week. Yeah, you know, I can do one of these sorts of planes of the head type things in about like 10 minutes, right? Something like that. But it comes from just practicing that itself, right, as an exercise. You know, doing that and then doing it again, right? So sometimes when I'm I want to do some sculpting, but I'm kind of uninspired to do anything, I might just do one of these just to practice it, right? And once you've done it a few times, you get better at doing it and it becomes an easier process. But it's a good exercise to do. All right, I'm going to sign off. See you guys.